Welcome to part 2 of the 5th episode of Growing Stronger's LP Doc Talk. Today we're speaking with Becky Curran, a motivational speaker who has graciously donated her time to share her expertise on the topics of school and bullying in relation to little people. Becky will be answering questions that were submitted online by the LP community. If you'd like to submit your own questions, you can do so by going online to growing.stronger.org and clicking on the LP Doc Talk tab. You will also have the opportunity to ask questions today at the end of the session. We hope you find this information useful and relevant, and we thank you so much for listening and supporting Growing Stronger. Born a little person in Boston, Massachusetts, Becky Curran holds a marketing degree from Providence College, has worked for one of Hollywood's top talent agencies, and at CBS television studios, where she assisted with the casting of pilots and television series. Curran also served as the marketing director and co-founding board member of the Catalina Film Festival. A prolific public speaker, Curran has spoken for groups throughout the United States and Kenya, encouraging people to change their initial perceptions of people with physical differences. She currently resides in New York City, where she serves as president of the Little People of America New York City Mets chapter, serving members in all 5 boroughs of New York City. To learn more about Becky's speaking engagements, visit her site online at 𝘾𝙊𝙉𝙑𝙀𝙊𝙁. Thank you, Becky, for being here. We really appreciate you being with us today and look forward to the information you have to share. So if you're ready, you may begin.
Thank you so much, Tracy. I'm really excited to be here because I always work really hard to change the perception of dwarfism in the media because that affects how we're treated in society. It's really important for people with dwarfism to feel like included members of society, and most parents, 80% of little people are born to average height parents, so most parents, for the first time they see a little person is in TV and on screen before they had their child. And I really strive to set that example by being my best self so I can help set an example for the future of other little people, and hopefully we can get rid of the word bullying and then it never exists again. So I'll get started with the questions. I'm very thankful that people sent in some really thought out questions that are applicable to what people are going through now and what the struggles are and how we can overcome them. So the first question is, how would you explain dwarfism to a class of elementary school versus middle school versus high school students? Since I have spoken over the past few years at all 3 places, I would just say that in elementary school, it's trying to break it down into simple portions so people understand just that it's okay to be different. A lot of times when I'm speaking at the elementary school level, I'll just share stories of things I do in everyday life and bring normalcy to the table. And then I get them to ask me questions, whether it's, where do I go on vacation? Do I play sports? And it's just starting a dialogue so they understand that we're really just another person. We just happen to be on the shorter side. And in elementary school, if it's regarding a student who's entering elementary school, most likely for the beginning at least, a lot of the kids are around the same height. So the questions come just out of curiosity why they look a little bit different, but you can bring some normalcy to it by just showing how you do your everyday things, and sometimes you use a stool. What was really helpful for me when I was growing up in elementary school, I did have a book that I brought to the different schools. It was called Think Big, and it had a little person, and it showed her going through school, walking around the community with friends, and it really helped normalize and just get each of my classes to understand that I just want to be included and be a part of the class, and the best they can do is treat me the same as anyone else. As far as the middle school goes, that is when everyone starts growing a little taller, and it is a struggle just trying to fit in, trying to find your grounds. A lot of towns sometimes have one elementary school and then they join with other towns to go to a middle school. And there are some struggles there because some of these new people had never been exposed to this little person who's entering into that middle school. So I would say that's definitely a perfect example where it really makes the most sense when I do come and speak at those middle school levels because it allows people to ask me tough questions so the child doesn't have to answer them on their own. Whenever I go and speak at schools, I never point someone out in the audience. I allow them to ask me questions if they want, but they're just a part of the community, and that's to set an example that I just want to be a part of the community, and it's okay to ask questions and be curious, but don't make assumptions and make fun of people, because that's when the bullying really starts. And then high school, I would say, for me, one would think that bullying happens in like elementary or middle school the most, and then high school people start growing up. But for me, it was an emotional time in high school because a lot of my girlfriends who I had grown up with throughout school had been interested in dating guys, and they just didn't think that I could be around. They started thinking that I would be embarrassing to have around. And it was really unfortunate because I knew how to interact with guys. I grew up sailing in a different town, and I was around them all the time. And that was what felt like the most bullying to me. So I think it's important to just feel included and voice your opinions if you're feeling left out early on, so then people understand that they're unintentionally or intentionally leaving you out. It's always important to find the common ground, find out where you stand with people so there are no secrets. And I feel like I learned from that experience, and there are going to be times you're going to have to let your child fall, and then they'll get stronger. They'll pick right back up, hopefully, and you've got to just let them talk to you about it. If they don't feel like talking about it to you, just let them find the time that's right for them to discuss it. But if they're feeling bummed out when they come home because people weren't accepting, I think it's important for you to just ask them if they're okay, and let them know that there's always an open line of communication if they choose to use it. So going into the next question is if my child is being bullied, should I confront the other parents first or go directly to the school? I think the situation is talk to your child first, see what they would want to be done, because they're the best judge of themselves. And if they think that it's uncomfortable if you confront the other parents first, because then their child is going to come after you and be even more of a bully, that may be the second approach. And if you go directly to the school, you also have to know that part of that may include the school talking to the student, and unfortunately your child could still be singled out because the school's going to say you need to stop that bullying, and it's clear that they know which person even without saying the person. So it's trying to figure out how to foster a safe environment after the situation's confronted, and really maybe think about a mediation where if you do go to the school, find a way for both families to sit down together and talk things out, and hopefully that can help with improvement. Because if it starts from the parents saying that we're not going to tolerate this, especially in front of the school, it will kind of set an example of how they need to change the way their child is being towards a positive way. And then how would you handle exclusion, which maybe isn't intended to be bullying, but hurtful nonetheless? I think what I was saying about when I was in 11th grade and I felt really excluded, I think it's important to speak up, because maybe there were times where I just internalized it and it made me hurt so much more inside because I was being left out. But if I had time to really, it's hard to gain the courage to do this, but to get a group of friends together who had been my friends since preschool and just sat down with them and said, you know what, this isn't fair. Like, we all grew up together, we were all friends growing up together, and we will probably continue to be friends for a very long time, but I'm feeling left out. And I really think it would be important for you to make me feel more included and not think that I can't interact with other people just because they're the opposite gender. I think it's just important to confront the situation, hard as it is, and it has taken me a long time to really get the backbone to be able to do it, because I think it's doing it for the kids, knowing I watch that they get hurt and they get bullied, and it's not acceptable. So we are more of service to others if we can stand up for ourselves and really voice it as soon as we feel it's happening. Just like if you start to feel a pain in your arms or legs or a headache, you want to look a little deeper into it. You want to tell the doctor if something's bothering you. You need to be your best advocate and voice your opinion. And even if it's not right away voicing how you're feeling to the group that's doing it, but maybe people around that group, people who you can trust and confide in, who can then help you approach the situation when it comes to confronting the people who are excluding you in the most comfortable way possible. The next question is, how do you handle when your child is planning on competitive sports activities in high school, varsity football, baseball, basketball, and competitor cheer, dance team, etc., but you know they won't be physically able to compete on that level yet? They haven't really realized that. Do you just let it go, or give them the reality check and tell them there's a big chance they won't make the team? That's a really tough one. I grew up playing soccer. I was on the swim team through high school, and I was on youth soccer through high school, and I did some skiing and then sailing for about 10 years. With those sports, there weren't really any, well, soccer, I knew that I wasn't going to play for the high school team, and I kind of came to terms with that pretty early on. And then when it came to swimming, one thing they did that was really helpful, just so I can compete on the same level as a lot of my peers, this was before I made it to the high school level, but when I was doing it in my town, sometimes we would have races and it would be a 50-yard race. They would have me do 25 yards, so I would be at the same level as everyone, and there were opportunities for me to come in first because I was able to do a shorter distance in order to play at everyone else's level or swim at everyone else's level. So I think what's important is having a conversation early on and talk to your child about the best approach to take when it comes to exploring activities that they really love. And then hopefully that'll lead to them really coming to the reality that being on a varsity team isn't going to be the best reality to expect, but you can at least strive to go to practice and be a part of the group and find a way to be a part of the team without necessarily having to compete on the highest level. There's even options of junior varsity, so maybe that's a realistic goal. I think it's having those conversations and talking to the athletic directors at the school as soon as possible when your child becomes interested in a particular sport, and really encourage them to practice. And even if they're practicing outside of being on a varsity team, as long as they continue to hone that skill that they're really passionate about, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter what level they're playing at, because the only person you should be competing against in general is your own way of doing things, your own athletic ability. And then, of course, people competing against others, but get them to really feel comfortable with what it is they're passionate about and what they want to pursue, and then talk to them about the realities of being on a varsity team. I even think just even having those doctor visits growing up, there were a lot of things that the doctor said you should be careful when doing certain things. So make sure your child's included in those conversations, just so they're aware of what's realistic and what isn't the best decision. Because I even think about like a competitive cheer or dance team. Well, if they're lifting people up and doing different cheers, sometimes that can be risky because a lot of little people do face the fear of getting picked up, and little we must be light, but sometimes that's not as much the case. So we just have to watch out for ourselves and listen to our bodies. So if you're ever hurting, you want to make sure you address it early, especially if you're playing in these highly competitive sports. And the next question is, do you have any great comeback lines that young kids can be used when offensive things are said to them? That's funny. That's a great one. I think a lot of things are putting people in shock when they are reacting and making comments. Most times when I'm walking around New York City, there are a lot of people making comments, and I don't even respond. Sometimes people feel worse if you don't respond because they're expecting a reaction. But I would say just be comfortable with yourself, and if someone says something, just say, so why does that matter? Or I was born this way. There's nothing to be sad about. Like, ask them a question about something that may be uncomfortable for them. Try to get them to understand that you want them to feel like they're in your shoes. Turn it around and be like, how would you like it if someone made fun of you that way? And just get them to understand that it's not acceptable. So you can say even quick things like, that was rude, or it doesn't matter that I'm different. I'm not upset about it. So just quick, like, show people who you are and be proud of who you are, and don't let that barrier come down and let people's comments get to you, because it's really something that's an insecurity inside of them. They're uncomfortable with their own selves, which makes them project it onto you, and they automatically assume because you're different, you're uncomfortable, but you need to show them your pride and how much you can contribute. Then the next question is, how do you handle when your child comes home upset because his friends are leaving him on the playground because he can't keep up and he's feeling left out? I know his friends are probably not doing it intentionally, but what would you suggest that isn't just his mom or dad fighting his battles for him? I think it's definitely having that conversation once again with your child, making sure that they want you to handle these battles in certain ways, because that is probably a struggle for them, watching you fight these battles, and then they have to still face these children in school the next day. So it's always important to have that initial conversation with your child on how they think something or want something to be handled. And I think it's worth having your child speak up to his friends about it and why it's bothering him and why it's not fair. And it's not fair for anyone to feel left out. So maybe they could pick an activity that's a little less rigorous, something that they can all do together, maybe just hanging out on the grass and doing something that would make everyone feel more included. But I think it's also talking to the teacher early on. Meet with the teacher before the student starts the school year. And even if this is 1 year going into the next, make sure you have people understand that your child is feeling left out. And if the teacher can foster an environment where they feel more included. One thing that really worked well for me growing up is I had a friend who was in my class from preschool to 7th grade, and it helped because I felt more included, because when she would make friends, I would become friends with those people as well. And then it was easier to have allies. And there were some people who ran ahead, but there were also people who waited up for me. And I think it's important to try to find that ally once your child feels comfortable standing up for themselves. It's always nice to have an ally that can be there for them and look out for those moments that they know this child would be bothered by because they're feeling left out in one way or another. So I think in general, early on, there should be at least one ally in the school that your child can rely on or go to just to talk to. And hopefully that one ally isn't the type of person that would leave them behind at the playground. Then we have, should I give my child information on dwarfism and have them explain it to the class, or should I, the parent, go into my class and explain? I think that would be a choice again. Have your child choose what they prefer. I think maybe the approach that I would think of first is have the teacher do it, because that's what we ended up having with my classes growing up. The teachers did it because your parent's not going to be in the school classroom with you the entire year, and your teacher's going to be there. And if you get your teacher to understand early on, then it creates an environment that the teacher can foster among the students in the classroom. So I think for me, the approach would be to give the teacher the information. I would say try to give them the information ahead of time so they can study up on that and ask questions of you, the parent, before they go into that first day of school when they're planning to read the book or the materials that they may give out. I think it's important to go to Little People of America and see if maybe they can send some brochures ahead of time that the students can take home with them, because it would also be important for the students' parents to learn a little bit once their child goes home after that first day of school. Because if the parents learn about it, then the parents can start talking about it with their child regularly, and it can help everyone understand that every child just wants to feel included, and they want to feel accepted, and they don't need people making fun of them just because they're different. The next question is, what extracurricular activities do you recommend I should get my child with 𝘾𝙗 into? For extracurricular activities, I guess it just depends on what they're referring to. Most likely they're referring to sports. For me, sports were important, and soccer was something I really loved being a part of. All of the sports that I participated in, I was competing among my average height peers. I was never involved with Dwarf Athletic Association or any of the other specialty sport leagues, but I just competed with my average height peers because that's kind of how life is. There are more average height people in this world than little people, and we should learn to participate in activities and find ways to get along and work together. So I would say swimming is great. Swimming is really great for the joints. Try to get them involved early on so then they don't have that fear of being in the water, because it's just a great sport all around. Soccer, I loved. Sailing, it was a lot of fun. Windy days were tough because you need more weight in the boat in order to keep the boat flat, but in most cases I was fine. You just have to not be afraid of the water and expect that you may fall in here and there if the boat tips over, but ask them what they're passionate about. I've always loved photography, so in class for my extracurricular activities that I was able to choose within the school day, I did take photography class, I took some art classes. I think just get them to tell you what they like, see what patterns they're following as they're growing up or even as a child, and let them try things. And if they don't like them, they can always try something else. But find out early on what interests them, and maybe even go to the library or the local community center and see if there are activities you can try out where you wouldn't have to commit for a full year. Try to find those things that you can do early on that will allow them to find what they're passionate about and what activities would interest them the most. And then the next question is, what advice do you have for an incoming college freshman with 𝘾𝙗 who will be living in the dorms on campus? Well, one thing It's when you are matched with roommates, sometimes you can, if you know someone in your community who is also going to the same school as you're going to, it may be worth asking them if they would want to put in a request so you guys can room together. So then you're not going feeling that you're going and meeting a bunch of complete strangers all alone. But then the other option is get to know your freshman year roommate early on. I didn't end up telling my roommate that I was a little person before moving in. We did have a lot of phone conversations before moving in, and that became a difficult situation because they were surprised. So I think try to find a way to not surprise your incoming roommate and get them to understand and accept you for who you are early on if possible. I know that sounds daunting, but it would be nice just to find someone who you can really get along with, and then the scariness of school that comes next will be more comfortable because you'll have someone you know, you'll have that ally. So try to find someone in your community, even if they're not going to be your roommate, someone who you can count on who's going to be at the school. I had a few people who were at my school who weren't necessarily in my class or my roommate, but I was able to call on them if I needed them. And I was also fortunate when I went on my college tour. There were two other little people around the campus, and I was able to be in school with one of them. She was a year above me, and then a year later another little person came, and there were 3 little people at the school at the same time. So when I saw that tour and I saw a little person on campus, it put me at ease because I knew that the school had been exposed to another little person before. That's how I handle a lot of what I do, like even finding doctors. You want to find someone, if they're not necessarily a specialist, you want to find someone who maybe has seen one other little person before, just so they know what to expect. You're not going in with any surprises. So try to keep things as surprise-free as possible. And then I think it'll work out. It's a great experience. I would say living in the dorms is something I would never want to take back, and definitely try it out. All right. Sorry about that. So besides putting stools in the classroom and bathroom, what other accommodations recommend for schools? I would say those are the basics. When I was in 12th grade, I had copies of my books in my classroom. I think that was really helpful. And in junior year as well, because I had back surgery, and then it was bad for me to carry a bunch of books around. So it was nice to have those books in the school. Other than that, I would just say on an as-needed basis, maybe a stick if you need to reach a doorknob or a light switch. But other than that, really just if there is something that becomes difficult, find a solution for it. But those accommodations are pretty much the basic accommodations, and I think a lot of school administrators assume that we need like the most accommodations just to feel comfortable, but it really is just do simple light accommodations because this child doesn't want to stand out any more than they already do. And if they can feel included and have just a few stools here and there, that's the best thing that could happen. And I would say definitely keep them in the mainstream classes. There's no reason to have a little person in a special needs classroom because we can learn at the same level as everyone else. And there may be other complications that come with whatever they may be going through, and maybe that would require some special attention. But on average, most little people, we need to just be with the rest of the crowd because that's how we're going to be in the rest of life. So try to make them feel included with the fewest accommodations as possible, just so they can get by and feel a part of the community without standing out. Then the next question is, I would love to hear about your experience growing up and what experiences left positive and negative impressions with you. That's a great one. So, I had a lot of experiences growing up, and it really starts with the amazing way I was raised. My parents were great, and they challenged me from day one. They wanted to make sure that I could compete and be a part of the community of my average height peers, and they did everything they could to foster those relationships early on. As I said, having a friend who was in my class from preschool to 7th grade who could really look out for me and advocate for me, having people treat me the same as everyone else rather than making me feel quote unquote special. I didn't need that. I didn't want that. And even when we were growing up, I have an older sister who's average height, and my parents would have people come over, and they always wanted to bring presents for some reason. They wanted to give me something because they all thought I was cute and wanted to treat me a little bit differently than they did my sister. And my parents insisted if they were going to bring a present, they bring one for my sister. So they really implanted that in people's heads that you can't give her special treatment. You need to treat them equally. And that's really how the rest of the world needs to learn to be. Like, if a little person does something wrong, they should be properly punished. If they do something right, then they should be rewarded, but not in any different way than anyone else. So I think that was a really important part of my childhood growing up. And it's gotten me to understand that I don't need special treatment or to be treated differently. I just want to be treated as me and rewarded for hard work I do, but also if I make a mistake, I want to be told. Constructive criticism is so important. I know it's so hard for people to give it, but when people are always telling me that I'm doing everything right, like, you get a little suspicious, and you want people to be truthful and honest with you. And I rather people tell me if I make a mistake so I can learn from it and fix it in the future, change the way I do things. So really, just getting that constructive feedback and getting people to understand I just want to be part of society was fostered through the way that my parents raised me, and I'm forever grateful for it. And growing up with surgeries, it was difficult having my leg surgery when I was 3, and then I had another one when I was 13, and then when I was 15, I had 7 pieces of my lower vertebrae taken out. So I missed a month of school, and I had to make the decision whether I wanted to stay back or continue on with the class that I was continuing with. When my parents went to the doctor when I was first born, he said, one thing that's really important is keep Becky in the same schools as much as possible. Don't be moving around to different towns and different school districts if you can help it, because then she'll get to know those people growing up through school, and she'll be less likely to be bullied. Well, when I got to the decision where I had to make whether I wanted to stay back a year or keep up with my class, and I ended up making the decision of keeping up with my class, even though I missed 29 days of school. I found a way to get back on track, because even having people in the same school in a different grade, that's still getting to know people who I hadn't really gotten to know before. It was important for me to stay with my grade. So as much as possible, I think it's important for people to stay with the group that they grow up with, if a family can help it, and if they don't need to travel until maybe after the child finishes grade school. That was really beneficial for me to stay in the same place. And then when I went to college, it was great to have that exposure of other little people in the school. And it was interesting because I spoke on a panel with one of the other little people, and she happens to also be Black. And she said that she felt like she didn't have trouble fitting into the school because the school was predominantly Irish Catholic white people. And she didn't have trouble because she was fitting into the smaller group of people. A lot of times people will say to me, oh, they have two things going against them. That must be a really hard life. But sometimes I've noticed people who have more things against them sometimes have more groups to fit into. And she was able to fit into that smaller population of diversity where I was struggling to fit into the rest of the school. So even though there were other little people at the school, there were definitely challenges. I don't think any day has been particularly easy when you're in front of a huge group of strangers and you don't know how they're going to react or if they're going to make you feel included or not. It really just depends on the environment you're in, and it starts with how people are raised. So start off as parents by raising your child with the same level of respect and get them to understand that even if someone's mean, kill them with kindness. Treat them the same as you would anyone else, and try to educate them and get them to understand that it's okay to be different. And if it's not bothering you, then it shouldn't bother them. And it's harder said than done. I'm aware of that. So I'm really thankful that I have that reminder. If I'm having a down day or upset about something, I'll talk to my parents and they'll give me a pep talk. And I think it's important to keep that open line of communication. Allow the child to ask you questions whenever they need to, and give them your honest feedback. Because if you hide anything, if there are any secrets, if you're trying to protect them from bullying or anything that may be going on in their lives, it's a disservice to them, because they need to know the truth. They need to face the truth so then they can grow stronger because of it. And then last question is, my 4-year-old came home from preschool and said one of his classmates made fun of him by calling him small and a baby. I know he is in it for many more years of this, since children can be quite torturous towards one another. But what can I tell him to say as a response to other kids? Also, how do I explain to him that he has dwarfism? Wow. I think it's important early on to give him a response that he can give to the kid. So maybe he can say, so what? Why does that matter? I was born this way. It's okay. Just keep it simple so they can remember it. And then explaining to him how he has dwarfism. I think find some books, get some picture books that explain it a little easier than just trying to have a conversation with him, because that 4 is still a young age, and it may take time for him to process and understand what dwarfism is specifically. So keep it simple. But you can also remind him that he's unique, and he was made that way for a reason, and there's nothing to be sad about. He should know that he's loved, and if kids are making fun of him and he learns to say, so what? Why? Does that matter? Then hopefully he can find a way to not let it get to him. But in that situation, I would also make sure you talk to the preschool and just say that that's happening and find a way for them to look out for it, because it's not easy for a child that young to get rid of a situation like that if it's happening too much. So maybe the teachers can get in on it and read a book. Even if a school reads a book at the beginning of the year, there's no reason they can't reinforce it by reading it again and again when appropriate. I think sometimes people forget the lessons they may learn early on in a book. And if they learn more from just at that moment, maybe even the book doesn't have to even be about dwarfism. It could be about bullying and how it's not fair, and you shouldn't call anyone names, and he's not a baby, he's a preschool student. The biggest takeaway from all of these is that we just want to be treated as people at the end of the day, and bullying needs to go away. It doesn't need to exist anymore. We should just get rid of it. And hopefully we can someday. And we just get called by our names. So many people also get so caught up on like what to call someone, a dwarf, a little person, a midget, which is completely unacceptable. And they lose track of the fact that we just want to be called a person. We have to advocate for ourselves when something's going on in our lives, whether we have to take care of something medically or even just personal things that may be going on. We find ways to take care of it. We don't need others to feel bad for us. And we don't need others to make assumptions about feeling bad for us. We just want people to ask questions, and I'm so thankful that all these people asked me some great questions that hopefully the answers help. And you can always reach out to me. As Stacy mentioned, my website's beckymotivates.com, and I'm happy to answer any question at any time, always.
Thank you, Becky. Thank you so much. That was really great. It's some really good, useful information that I think will be a big help to a lot of people. So is there anybody on the line that would like to ask Becky a question right now? I'm going to say no. So with that, that concludes our call. So again, thank you, Becky, so much. We really appreciate you donating your time and your expertise to do this 𝘾𝙊𝙉𝙑 for us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Take care.